So I want to start this video by making it very clear that I don't have anything against traditional publishing. I just decided that years ago, it really wasn't for me. And there's a couple reasons why. And it's really one of the best decisions I think I've made when it comes to my writing. But if self-publishing is something you're considering, it's something that you should be well aware of both the pros and the cons to. And while I am a huge proponent of self-publishing, that doesn't mean that there aren't serious issues that we need to consider when talking about it. And that's what I want to do in this video. I want to give you as close to an unbiased look at the pros and cons of what self-publishing is as I possibly can, as someone who has self-published almost 3 books. 3rd book coming this month, most likely. We'll start with the pros. First, creative control. You will have greater creative control as a self-published author. You have complete control over your work, including the cover design, the formatting, the actual content of the work, your release schedule, if you want sequels or not. Your baby is actually your baby. You will have no one, besides perhaps your beta readers, your editors, your friends, family, anyone who's reading your book, telling you a couple different things and making some suggestions, but you'll have no one else telling you what to do with your writing. And those people, they're going to be making suggestions that ultimately you will be the one who decides if you want to accept them or not. But with that much power over your work comes some responsibility.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Which is why we're going to come back to this in just a little bit. It is faster and there are fewer barriers to self-publishing. No longer do you have to worry about being gatekept out of publishing your book. You can have your book read by people. You can get it out to them. You don't have to convince an agent or a big publisher or an independent publisher that it is worth their time, because the only time that matters is your reader's time. And I guess your own, because you probably would have spent at least several months to a couple years working on whatever you are publishing. But you no longer have to worry about things like, how big is my social media following? Is it big enough to get an agent? Am I finding the right agent to represent my book? And even if I do find an agent, will it potentially go to the right publisher? Or is that publisher just not currently accepting anything in this specific genre or this specific type of book right now? And with speed, you avoid the entire querying process. You avoid the entire process of seeking a publisher. Really, it could be done in a couple of minutes if you don't give a fuck about any kind of, quality control. Please don't do that. Please care about quality. Please make sure that whatever you are publishing, you're publishing it with intent and you are your own quality control. Don't put shit out there. Sorry, I just had to, please, just quality. You are the one in control. Just because it's faster and there are fewer barriers doesn't mean to make it all shit. The time that you spend in self-publishing is going to be generally more on the actual process of creating a book, not on the process of finding someone who cares enough or believes in it enough to give it a shot. Your process will be on the writing. It'll be on finding an editor, editing yourself. It'll be finding beta readers. It'll be marketing. It'll be commissioning people to make the cover, or making the cover yourself if you are more talented than I am. Those are the things that you will be spending your time on instead of on the search. And as someone who had a very large Excel spreadsheet with all the agents that I had queried with the help of my wife, who's honestly a hell of a lot more organized than I am, well, I preferred spending time on the writing and the editing and the covers and things like that. Now, the marketing point, hold on to that. And of course, you will have greater royalties if you self-publish. Self-publishing typically allows authors to have significantly higher royalties. And I'm not just talking a little bit, I really mean significant. Now, finding out exactly what kind of royalties you would get from a traditional publishing deal is not as easy as you might think, because it is going to vary across genre, author, and publisher. An independent publisher, for example, is probably going to give higher royalties than one of the big 5 publishers. But doing some research online, you can kind of get some of the same numbers I did, with essentially it varying between around 10% to 40% royalties, with kind of an industry standard, using that term loosely because it isn't really like a standard, of about 25%. So 25% of your royalties from selling your book will go to you. Now, that may or may not have been you getting money up front, or there may be a graduated scale where after the first 500 sold copies, your royalties go up. So maybe 5% royalties for the first 500, 10% for the next 500, and so on. So it's something to be considered, that there is no simple answer to this, except that it will almost, if not always, be higher from self-publishing, because self-publishing with the real industry standard of Amazon is 70%. 70% royalties for you for the book that you wrote. And you can also think of, oh, that kind of sucks, even it is your book. And you could go the route of trying to get really essentially 100% royalties by selling your book yourself through your own, public webpage. But what you'll find quickly there is that there are other fees involved in that, like PayPal and things like that. So it'll 70% is really just a good idea of what you would be making. Now, if you want to go wide, there's a service called Drafted Digital, and Drafted Digital takes an additional 10% cut. So if you want to be on Barnes & Noble and Kobo and things like that, you're looking more like 60% royalties, but that is still significantly higher. And one thing to talk about here is that we're not talking about anything but ebooks, because royalties on everything else get much more complicated, whether it's print costs or the issues with Amazon and Audible and the sometimes not very good way that they are monetizing and taking royalties from authors. But that's something that I will leave to people like Brandon Sanderson to get into, and not myself yet, because I need to do more work on it and research. But essentially 70% of royalties for self-publishing, 25% if you traditionally publish. And finally, shelf life. And this one's kind of a bit more nebulous of a pro, but the shelf life of whatever book you self-publish is however long you want it to be. And that means the only way it gets replaced on the shelves or the digital shelves is if you do it. There is not going to be another new release from a different author that the publisher wants to push instead of your own book that will relegate you down lower. However, one thing to note here is that by having that long shelf life, it does still rely on you, the author, continuing to do marketing for that book. Your book is kind of like this ever-sinking weight in the ocean. It's constantly sinking down, and you have to kind of keep propping it up. And propping it up often takes more money, it takes publishing more books, it takes marketing, it takes you getting yourself out there. So yeah, the shelf life is as long as you want, but that doesn't mean you stop running. But let's talk about the cons of self-publishing, because these are very real cons and they are something that you should consider. The first is really the cost, the lack of professional editing or cover design. A lot of times when you get a traditional publishing deal, that's kind of part of the deal. You are getting potentially thousands of dollars worth of editing with your publishing deals. So that is a significant portion of what you should consider. And this is kind of why, in some ways, self-publishing isn't as open as it may seem. Well, yes, technically you can publish anything you want within reasons and guidelines from the storefronts, so you do have to follow those. But really, you can publish work that is unedited. You can publish work without a cover, or a cover potentially even created on the website itself. Amazon has a cover creator. You can just go and do it there. Honestly, the big things here are going to be all kind of self-inflicted costs. If you want a professional book, if you want something that is guaranteed to be quality and something worth the time of the readers who will be reading it, you are going to be paying a lot of money as a self-publisher. It is something that you have to consider before you go down that route. The next one is going to be quality control, which really falls in line with the first point. There's a lack of it. In self-publishing, there is a lack of traditional quality control. There is no one but yourself saying, hey, this is good or not good. And to many people, many readers, that is still something that they consider. A self-published book can at times have a very big stigma around it because of that lack of a gate. That lack of a gate saying that, hey, this is actually good. Now, we know that there are traditionally published books that are absolute crap, and there are self-published books that are absolute gems. But that doesn't mean that the lack of quality control doesn't have an impact on consumers and even on authors, because you have that little idea in your head that, hey, this has been through fewer eyes, this has been through fewer judgments, so it could potentially be a lot worse. And a lot of it comes down to you and how you want your writing to be perceived. Do you want it to be perceived as quality? And then how much and how willing are you to do what you need to do to make sure it's quality? Because there's no one that's going to tell you it's not, except potentially the reviewers who are going to leave 1-star or 2-star reviews on your book. Now, this next one I kind of debated on because it's not honestly clear that it is something that will be easier with traditional publishing, because it really depends on your publishing contract and it depends on the publisher and how much faith they have in you. But limited promotion. The one thing we can say about this is, as a self-published author, it's on you. 100%. No help. All of the marketing and publishing is on you. It's up to you to come up with a marketing strategy, a way to define your book, a way to find your readers. It is all on you. That's part of why some authors like Jenna Moretti have talked about how marketing may be one of the most important things for any author to know about, to learn about. And it's something that I would echo here. It is something that I made the mistake of not knowing about until probably 2 to 3 years into my whole journey as an author. If I had known earlier those things, it would have helped me out. So consider this your call to action. If you are still considering self-publishing, start looking up marketing on books. Start looking up some of the things. Watch YouTube videos, read articles. Start learning how you can market your book, because it is going to be essential to you. Trust me when I say, I know from experience that putting it on Amazon and being like, hey, they'll find it. Of course they will, because algorithms is not a valid marketing strategy. And finally, we're gonna circle back to really what was the first pro of self-publishing. What was the last con of self-publishing? And that's the decision-making process. It is on you. You have to wear all of the hats. You are the writer, you are the editor, you are the marketer, you are everything. You are making all of those decisions yourself. And it does help if you have someone you trust to talk to. Like for me, early on, it was, I relied on my wife, and she helped guide me in things I needed to do. And then beyond that, now I have a wonderful editor, and I trust my editor implicitly. But the decision making still ultimately all comes back to you. How are you going to market your book? How many pages should it be? What kind of cover should you go with? What genre does it need to be in? All of these things you have to figure out yourself, and there's no one to tell you yes or no. While that freedom, that control is wonderful in one way, it's also very daunting to know that all of that decision making is on you. The success and failure of your dream is up to you, and wearing all those hats can be very, very overwhelming. So consider that carefully. Self-publishing may sound easier than traditional publishing because you don't have to go and find someone else first, but that's kind of a misnomer. Self-publishing has a whole host of other issues and other work and other stressors that you will have to be considering if you decide to go that route. Those are my pros and cons for self-publishing. I would love to see what pros and cons you have down below. Please comment and let me know what are some of the things that, if you have self-published or are thinking about it, you have struggled with or you have found particularly helpful. Now, I started my journey as an author trying to seek out a traditional publisher. I set a timeline for myself. I started out and I was like, I am going to shop this around for a year. And if that doesn't work, I am self-publishing. And essentially, that's what I did. I shopped around for a year. I was told that my book was good, but it couldn't sell because the genre was too confusing. And so essentially I was like, well then fine, I am going to try and do that. Now granted, the agent that told me that it was too confusing was right, because I couldn't figure out my genre for a very long time. I am very happy with what I decided to do in going ahead and self-publishing. My book went on to win awards, and I am very happy with it and happy with the sales and numbers and things like that are happening right now. However, there is a catch to that, to say that there has been a lot of investment on my part. Even where I am right now has come at a very steep cost. And I wanted to kind of give that give you an open look at what that looks like as essentially a struggling author with this video right here. So take a look there, and really, if you're undecided on self-publishing, that might help if you decide that's something you want to do or not do. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.